Hey guys, Dan here with Battlefield Curator. Some years ago, I put together really cool M16 clones, and I've shot them so many times over the years that I think it requires an update, a review, an overall overview of the clones I did and what I plan to do in the future. Because when you think about how the M16 really integrated with the US military during the Vietnam War and even afterwards, there were so many different developments, there were so many different variants and models. I recently picked up an XM177E2 and really enjoy it. So, what's next on my list? Well, I'll give you some of my thoughts, but first I want to give you an overview of the M16 clones that I did. Alright, starting off here, I've got 3 different ones that I have currently, and they're all derived from an actual Colt M16. Specifically M16A1s, because they're all Colt marked, but later in the 70s. So the first one I got here is an XM16E1. The XM16E1 was the experimental M16 for the US Army. The XM16E1 clone that I have was the first one that I ever started. It started off with this upper that's marked CK, and that dates it to around 1972 to 1973. Now I went to a show, a Militaria show, and got it there, and it was just the upper. What I did was get a nickel boron bolt for it, so that way it kind of mimics the original chrome bolt that it would have had. I picked up the furniture from Numeric, and the buttstock is a very early type that does not have the trap door for the cleaning kit. So in Vietnam, some of these guys would actually have cleaning rods attached to the side of their XM16E1s because they realized that you really had to clean these things. The ammunition was pretty much the main culprit for a lot of the jams that these soldiers experienced during the early integration of the XM16E1. A lot of people blame the rifle, but as we saw, the Army didn't really integrate the rifle well with its soldiers. They gave them poor ammunition, they didn't give them cleaning kits, and they told them it was a self-cleaning rifle. And these XM16E1s had the chrome bolt and bolt carrier group, but they didn't have the chrome bore. But I think the XM16E1 was a very interesting part of the M16 history, and it did see a lot of use in the Vietnam War. Once soldiers realized what the problem was, they integrated some fixes or some temporary solutions until the M16A1 was introduced. Now the XM16E1 clone that I have, the lower I got from Palmetto State Armory, and it's an H&R, and that's a brand they own. This upper also came with the barrel, so that was pretty cool, and it also has the 3-prong flash hider on the end of it, which was very enticing for me when I picked it up. The next 2 I ended up doing after this, because the first one was just so fun, were M16A1 clones. I got the kits from What a Country, and they were actually in pretty decent condition, not too bad. Not as good as the upper I got. One I got with surplus furniture, and the other one I got just with the components. And of course, the lowers I got from Palmetto State Armory, and the barrels I got from Palmetto State Armory as well. Now, one barrel on one of them was just the barrel without the front sight post. So what I ended up doing was going to another gunsmith and getting them to mount the front sight post on the barrel, which is a pain if you want to try to do it yourself, which lessons learned, don't do that again, because it did cost a little bit more money, and they didn't put the right pins in because they had to make the pins a little larger. So for the most part, it doesn't have the correct pins. Now the other one, I just got the barrel from Palmetto State Armory with the front sight post already on there. So that one's good. These uppers were from What a Country, and they are marked CH, which means that they're 1974. One of the uppers I got with furniture from What a Country, and the other one, I used some of the aftermarket ones from Palmetto State Armory, and I will say that there's a huge difference here between the surplus furniture and the new made furniture that they make. So if I was going to do something again, I would try to source out surplus furniture again. Now I will say that the XM16E1 buttstock was a little foam liner in the inside, and it seemed like all the ones I got from Numeric were warped in some way or another. Well, I used 2 different processes to get that out. I used a chemical process, and I used by using some cleaners and solvents that I had to try to melt out some of that stuff. And then I also used a big old bore brush on the end of a drill, like scrape out the inside, which took a long time and it wasn't working too well. Lesson learned, don't use the acetone because it actually will start forming cracks on the outside of the stock. So like I have one that has a crack on it and man, I wish I would have known that, but you gotta think about it. You're using chemicals on old plastic furniture that's probably not good for it and it's probably gonna cause issues. For the most part, these are mostly historically correct with military surplus components. All right, so now I'm thinking, what else could I do? What could be some other cool things to do with maybe another kit from what a country, or maybe if I could find some surplus components? There's the dissipator, there's another CAR-15, the XM177E1. There's so many M16A1 and CAR-15 variations that we saw through the Vietnam War and even up to the adoption of the M16A2. So there's a lot of options out there for an enthusiast like me who wants to get into the retro M16 world. Well, first of all, we have to look at a little bit of historical data here, because if you notice, the uppers that I got are about the 1970s, and they all have the forward assist. So in 1956, Eugene Stoner designs the AR-10 in the .308 caliber. 1957, yeah, it got scaled down to the AR-15. In 1959, Colt bought the rights. In 1960, General Curtis LeMay actually tested the AR-15 and loved it so much that he adopted it for the U.S. Air Force. Now that's 1962. Now at the same time, these were also being used by advisors in Vietnam for some of the mercenary troops that they were in charge of. And because they were such lightweight and shorter design than some of the battle rifles out there, yeah, they were actually easy to use. 1963, the M16 mass production began. And one of the things to note here is that the original M16 design did not have a forward assist. So it was around 1964 that the U.S. Army looked at experimenting with the M16 and said, we need a forward assist. So you saw the XM16E1 have a forward assist, and there were also some other things that they wanted with that. Around 1966 is really where you saw a lot of the jamming issues become very apparent. And it wasn't until 1967 that the M16A1 was introduced. And so it replaced the M14 as the standard service rifle. You gotta think about some of the advantages that the M16 had over the M14. They both had 20-round magazines, but you can carry more ammo with 5.56 than you could 7.62 NATO. Furthermore, the weight of the ammo was a lot less too. The rifle itself, the M14 fully loaded, weighed about 10.7 pounds. And it was awkward to carry around if you're rucking through the jungles of Vietnam. The M16s were smaller and weighed about 7.4 pounds fully loaded. And they had a pistol grip and a carrying handle and different sling mount areas. There are a lot of veterans who have their preferences of what rifles to use or what rifles work best for their situation in the Vietnam War. Some veterans might say the M14 was better than the M16 because it's less prone to jam, it fired a larger diameter bullet, and could cause more damage to an enemy soldier, which meaning that they're more likely to get knocked down when getting hit with one of the larger caliber bullets. Some people argue that the M16 was just better overall because they could carry it with more ammo, it was easier to handle, actually have a little bit better control over fully automatic fire when firing at enemy targets, which definitely helped with fire suppression and fire superiority.
I was there 68, 69. Well, I loved my M16. Our minimum load was 21 mag, and I carried more than that. It's easy to go through magazine full auto. I burned 10 magazines one night ambushed in the blink of an eye. Almost nobody had them jam if they took care of it. You did. You had to clean it. There's a lot of guys, they wouldn't clean the weapon. Crazy. But if you cleaned it, it was a good weapon. Still is. It's even a better weapon now.
And then you have some veterans, very few, but say the M1 carbine was all you really needed because the rifle only weighed about 5 pounds. And if you're going to be engaging with the enemy in close jungle combat, it was lighter, it was smaller and shorter. It still fired a 30 caliber projectile with 30 carbine. Even then it had more force than a 357 Magnum. I could definitely do the job. So going back to the M16 clones that I have, definitely fun to take to the range. They're enjoyable and I really enjoy sharing them with friends. Now, as far as what I should do next, I'm not sure really, because I'm kind of on the fence of an early M16 without the forward assist, or maybe some of the other innovative designs that we saw. And I know there's a lot of you guys out there that have probably got funds together to do your own, or maybe you've already done something. So let me know in the comments section what you might be planning to do, because I'm just looking for ideas here. Like I said, I just got the XM177E2 from H&R and really enjoy that. Each one of the M16 clones that I got were probably around the $1,400 range, and a lot of those prices really haven't changed that much. So I would definitely do it again. Definitely would look at What a Country and Palmetto State Armory and Numeric for furniture and everything else. So is this something you've done? Have you been to What a Country's website and seen what they got? Let me know in the comments section. And as always, be sure to learn history and curate history. Pulverize the like button, subscribe if you haven't. Make it a great day.